Okay, welcome. Good morning, good afternoon, good evening, wherever you are and whatever time you're listening to this. I am Sara Newberry, and I'm a barefoot massage therapist and a mind-body somatic coach. And I'm so grateful to continue this conversation with my dear friend and colleague, Rachel Wolff.
That's
Rachel,
me.
tell me a little bit about you, 3 sentences, and
All right, short and sweet. Massage therapist, body worker for 18 years, San Antonio, Texas. My practice is currently called Mama Bear Massage. It's a perinatal practice. I work almost exclusively with mamas and their families. And then I teach. That's me.
Yeah, we're
All right.
both continuing education providers, right? And
Yes,
massage
yes.
therapists, they are required to participate in continuing education. And yeah, I think that that's a really great thing because I think it's important to continually learn.
Yeah, whether you're getting credit for it or not,
Yeah.
just be a
Yeah,
lifelong learner, please.
right. And I think the people who are drawn to massage are lifelong learners. I mean, I hope so, because part of what we have learned over the years is that what is normal, what is like acceptable, what is like scientifically, relevant, it changes and it always grows and evolves. So we really have to stay on top of what's happening.
So true. I know you and I have Gil Headley is one of our favorite teachers, right? Your face just lit up. Yes, love Gil. Love Gil. And if you're not familiar, definitely go check him out. He coined the term somanaut.
Mhm.
He's a out of Boulder, Colorado. He basically works in a dissection lab most of the time, but then he tours around and shares these amazing findings. And what I love about his work is it bridges anatomy and spirituality in such a very cool way that
He,
intersects. But
yeah.
he always says, be careful of what you know. Knowledge is always evolving, as you just said so beautifully. And I think about that often. Like, be careful of what you think you know. And I think that's maybe a good lead in for what we're going to talk about today with boundaries, because I see a lot of massage therapists talking about what they know with such certainty and like almost like they cling on to it. Like, this is what I know. This is what I know. Keep it loose. You got to just, keep that evolving and keep that growing, but don't be fixed to that.
It's almost like I have 4 kids, and when the fourth one came around, we just potty trained like 2 weeks ago. Well, really, over the last 2 weeks. And I said, the more children I have, the less I know about raising children. And I feel like that should be kind of true with like a lot of things, not just parenting. But, I've been doing massage for a very, very long time. What did we decide? Like 15, 18 years, something like that, whatever it is.
Yeah,
Um,
going on 18 probably. Yeah.
Yeah, and there are definitely some things that I can be with to expect. Like there's some expectations that I have about pain patterns or like clients or things like that, right? But the more I try to know something,
Yeah.
gets me in trouble, you know?
Yeah.
There's that wisdom of like, sure, I can like know what a certain kind of tissue feels like possibly, but then like how it's gonna, happen,
Mhm.
unravel or roll out the story. You just
Yes. So have the knowledge, but then have the wisdom to have the detachment from the knowledge, right? And like, um, there's a model. We were talking last time about authenticity, and one of the four drivers models that I've seen, it's one of these assessments that places you kind of into a quadrant, and the four quadrants are knowledge, power, wisdom, and love, which I thought was very interesting and probably not surprising to you at all. My two bigger ones were wisdom and love, and knowledge and power were like way down. But everybody's scan kind of is different. But I love that, those are the four. I think that's interesting to think about how those four kind of are always in a dance, you know. what's
Yeah,
actually driving us.
how those four sort of intersect, and because I'm imagining visualizing like a quadrant where yeah, there's probably a relationship between knowledge and power, but also knowledge and wisdom, and also
Totally.
power and love, you know?
Yeah.
They have to all kind of talk to each other.
Yeah, and it was cool when you take the assessment, how it kind of explains to you and breaks it down like, here's how that motivation could possibly be showing up in your world, and love that stuff. But yeah, I think wisdom and yes, love is great, but wisdom in the context of the professional sector or sphere, or that part of your life, that space in the professional spaces you inhabit, coming to those spaces with that greater wisdom that maybe I don't have all of the knowledge, right? Um, what else could be there that I'm not perceiving or able to know? And that could be a boundary too of what um, you know but don't say, or what you think and don't say. Um, not, I don't want to get too deep too fast with it, but all these different boundaries. So, and there's a million ways to break these boundaries down, right? I mean, they exist. Basically, Sarah, if you had to like come up with a definition of like what are boundaries?
Hmm.
I mean, my personal definition, I know I'm putting you on the spot, but my definition is like the boundary, basically just the most generic definition is like where I end and you begin, or where I end and other stuff begins.
Yeah, in some of my co-parenting survival kind of groups, right?
Mm,
They talk about boundaries being, and so I think, okay, hold on. I want to say, like, I think that boundaries, it depends on which kind of boundary you're talking about, right? Whether the definition applies or not. But I think that one thing that I've really resonated with and really enjoyed was the idea of it's the space to which I can still be self, like my whole self over here, and still love you in your whole self over there. It's
mm,
that kind of like where I am not self-abandoning, and I can still be with you.
mhm,
The practice, right? It's like valuing myself enough to value this container, like literally the skin that I'm in. That's one boundary, right? Physical boundary, if you will. And then my ability to stay whole over here while you're going through your experience and being able to still remain as whole as possible over here.
mm. Okay, so follow-up curiosity. How do you know,
Hmm.
right? How will I know when my boundaries are being crossed? How do you know?
Yeah. Well, again, I think there's a practice in that, right? And I think that it is that work of like really feeling. I mean, again, I'm a somatic based person, so I'm very connected to like what my body is saying. So one of my teachers does a meditation where we literally like feel the container. And I think that that is, yes, it's a very physical boundary of like, this is my container, this is me. And we
Mm,
do this thing where it's like, this is me, this is not me. And feeling with your hands, which are super perceptive, right? Like feeling with your hands, what is not you.
I absolutely love that. So, for so many reasons, but yes, reinforcing that proprioceptive, here's the boundary, brain body, solidifying it, and then also the grounding that might happen energetically with that too.
And I want to be really careful because that's really simplifying it, right? Like it's very, this is me, this is not me. And I think that with the practice of that, right? So like
Hmm.
showing up every day to that exercise,
Hmm.
you begin to unravel more beyond just the physical container, right? Now it's like there's a pretty popular book. It's called Boundaries. And they have all these offshoots, and there's one like Boundaries with Children. And when my oldest was much younger, we had an in-home therapist come in here, and she told me about the book. She's like, "You need to read this." And I read it, and I was still very like confused. Like, well, of course I'm the one in charge. Talk about power, right? Like, of course I'm the one in charge. I'm the mom. But there was so many times that I was handing my power over to my kiddo, and I didn't really understand it because I wasn't in this body practice, right, of boundaries, container skin, mine, not mine.
Yes.
And I think that boundaries are very difficult to somatically, I mean, in some ways they're not difficult, but in a lot
Mhm.
of ways in our culture, especially for women, but we have a really hard time with having that rooted boundary.
Mhm.
And I think it's still something I'm in relationship with every day.
Mhm.
I'm still in a
Mhm.
communication about it every single day. And I can look back now, that wisdom thing, right? Of being able to see how far I've come with boundaries, not only with my kids, but my clients, my friends, my family members, things like that.
Totally. Oh my God, the power dynamics, and when we're in spaces where we need to be a leader, those boundaries are going to be different. And that's a perfectly illustrated example of like how we can be in our professional space or our private space or our personal space, and what are the best boundaries for that space and our role in that space. And so where do you need to show up? I don't want to say with the upper hand, but as a leader is the way I like to say it. So you're leading the space. And sometimes when you're leading, you're intentionally allowing, you're grounding the space so that the other person can kind of feel in their power and step into their, um, freedom of expression or venting or sharing or whatever. And you hold it down. So all of these different ways of how, like, what can I control? Knowing what the goal is or what the dynamic you endeavor to have with the other person is. So that dance of relating to another person. But when you're a parent, I think that can be a little more fluid than when we're in a professional setting, right? It's a little more intimate. You can get in the weeds with your children in a way. Obviously, you can't with your clientele. But I think the premise is similar, right? Because you're holding the space, you're grounding the space, you're leading the space. And so you have to constantly be, like you pointed out, practicing. It's an always happening moment to like in granular as possible, evaluating, reevaluating, reassessing, and reconfiguring. Where do I end and where do you begin? These kinds of boundaries.
Yeah, absolutely. And I think that when you are in practice of this, okay, I feel like it's a more tangible experience whenever you begin to self-abandon. You can almost see it slow down, like, oh, here I go. I'm sliding down the self-abandonment hill or whatever. And I think that there's no way for because here's what I see a lot, okay? Especially in the massage community and on the boards on social media or whatever, there's like this very rigidity of like, this is how you handle a client. You see those screenshots. This is what I communicated. What do I do here? And then you get all these inputs, right? And at the end of the day, like, there's no one way to operate a business, and there's no one way to handle a client. It is this like fluid practice that you have to be in order to connect with yourself, to know what to do. I mean,
Yeah.
it's great to get like opinions, right? Like but that's still a practice, right? Okay, so
Mhm.
even
Which
if,
can validate, or yeah, and a lot of that I interpret it as maybe sort of egoic projections or advice giving, or and that's the online space for you, right? I mean, that's kind of why when we were talking last time, it's not the top shelf
Yeah, and
option.
but there is like a really beautiful practice to be had in there, right? So say you post this and you get 10 comments, and 10 comments, you can still practice like what comes into my space that feels good, what
Yeah.
comes into my space that's like, nope, not doing that. And just
Perfect. Yeah.
being
Yeah.
with that like somatic experience of like,
Yeah.
yes, maybe, or like, heck no. And like feeling your way somatically
Mhm.
through that. That
Yeah.
will give you a lot of insight into your what you should or want to do.
So, okay, last time we talked all about authenticity, and the other day I hosted a meetup group here and I gave them a little crash course in this. It was a little cannibalized version of a workshop I used to do called Align Your Life. And so we were going through a core values assessment as the first little bit. And the reason I'm bringing this up is we talked about authenticity last time. We do the core values assessment as a way to kind of understand what our core is. One of the identity models I use is 3 circles, sort of like a dartboard, if you will, like concentric circles. And the innermost circle is the core values. And then outside of that is our beliefs. And then the outermost one is our attitudes and opinions. And the idea is the attitudes and opinions are sort of always evolving, growing, changing. They're kind of always in flux. The middle bit, our beliefs, are a little more gelled. Think of it like fascia. It moves, but it can be pretty solidified if it's not challenged or questioned. And then in the middle is our core values. According to Carl Jung, those are formed very early in life, pretty much solidified by the time we reach puberty. And then throughout our adolescence, we kind of develop more of our identity. But the reason I bring this up is because a quick way to identify what our core values are, and this is going to be a tie into boundaries, whenever we get triggered, often it's because one of our core values is being stepped on, messed with, poked, infringed, violated, etc. And so understanding what are my core values is great. It's such a helpful activity. And you can go about it one of 2 ways. You can either do the negative, which is what I just illustrated. Think about some times that you were triggered and what was happening and what, I'll give you an example to illustrate. One of my past bosses was very rigid and closed-minded, and that triggered me all the time because open-mindedness, collaboration, all these things I value. So the second way, though, is the affirmative. And that's usually what people do. They look at a big list, they identify which ones, or they affirm which ones they connect the most with, and then they whittle the list down. Okay, so you can go about it one of 2 ways. But whenever you feel yourself getting triggered for whatever reason, I would just say that's a journaling, that's a moment to stop and pause and reflect and think really like emotionally or on a deeper level, what is happening, like maybe even psychologically, where I'm getting triggered. What is the root here? What is the thing that's being stepped on? And then again, to regain your personal power, what can I do about it? And that's where boundaries come in, is because it protects your A, right? It protects that authenticity. So when you're triggered or when you're going about your life and something oops a daisy happens and now you find yourself pissed off or triggered in some kind of way, stop, pause. Like you said, use all of the beautiful somatic practices to notice what's happening. Noticing is the first step. And a lot of people, can't notice right now, too busy. Take the time, make the time, stop and notice. And then if you can name it, that's incredibly powerful too. I'm angry because da 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 da. And then another level and layer of that would be to um fold that in against, okay, well, what core value or values or beliefs, if it's even reaching that next level of yourself, what is actually being trampled on, or, what's
Mm.
actually going on beneath the surface of the anger. Because, we've taught anger is a secondary emotion. It's a communicating emotion. When we feel anger, oftentimes there's something beneath the anger, right? So pay attention to anger. I think a lot of times too, just sidebar, a lot of massage therapists have strange behaviors around anger. I'll just put it that way. I've hired a lot of massage therapists, work with a lot of massage therapists. I've been in the tribe for a long time. I've just like observed a lot of funkiness, and I've heard a lot of interesting beliefs, I think. And um I have found anger to be a very useful emotion in my life. Um yeah. I don't know. And it's interesting, people, if there is a little bit of a weirdness around anger, maybe that's a thing to self-examine too, because what we're taught, especially if you're female, right? How you're supposed to externalize your anger. And
Mhm.
that's another, sorry, I'm rambling here, but that's another way to analyze boundaries is external versus internal. So what you hold in versus what you express outwardly,
Mhm.
um, whether it's journaling or whatever.
Yeah. Yeah, I think that so many of us, right? We aren't allowed to feel angry.
Why
And,
not?
well, I mean, yeah, I'm with you on that. I'm just, it's like a weird belief that we have of like, I'm not allowed to feel angry. Or like, we got to keep the peace or something, there's a lot of that. And I almost feel like working with boundaries and understanding your own boundaries may be a great place to start because you can be angry. Okay, you can be angry, but you still need the boundaries for yourself
The
to know,
regulation.
yeah, to be able to know how to, like, when is the right time to say something? When is the right time to be, when is the right time to, go go forward with your,
Yeah. And in my opinion, this is a skill thing, right?
oh,
This is this is like where parenthood comes in, and where like why puberty in the teenage years are so cray cray, because this is like when we're trying to teach skills, very difficult, nuanced skills building through adolescence, But even in adulthood, it's a ongoing practice. You're fine tuning it, right? You're working on it. I never had emotional regulation really modeled for me. So I really started to dive into the skills building part of it when I was in my mid 20s, when I started in therapy. And honestly, after I moved out of my parents' house, that's kind of when I started to grow up on that level. That was another boundary. I had to be out of that power dynamic to where I could be a little more autonomous in the world. And I think then I was able to step more into my authentic self, and I didn't um find myself being triggered as much. And so I know I'm talking about my journey, but I think it's similar for many, maybe.
I think something that I've been hearing a lot lately, and I've heard this before, but it's coming around again, so that says something to me. But you can't heal where you were hurt.
Amen.
And I feel like I'm gonna go off on a little tangent here, but like I think that physical space is really important. We know this in our collective understanding that our home should be our like sanctuary, like our safe space or whatever. And for a lot of people, it's not. I want to recognize that.
Hmm,
Um,
hmm.
and I also think that when we talk about healing and we talk about doing this kind of like inner work, our physical space of where we do this work is also very important. And I think, the in advent of TV, we brought like news and stuff into our home. Now with our phones, we have like now it's in our bed. We're like sleeping with
Mhm.
news sometimes. And I think that I have really been clued into like my physical space and what I am doing in my physical space. And I think that allows, it's still that boundary. That is what we're talking about here, is like a physical boundary. This is my bed, this is my home, this is where I watch the news, this is not where I watch the news. This is where I have arguments with my spouse or whatever, this is not where I have arguments
Yeah,
you know
absolutely.
I
So
just
smart. And again, from a somatic perspective, even if your conscious waking mind doesn't get the importance of that, there are parts of yourself that falls into that mode or way of being. Like if you need to have a tough really, really tough conversation with your significant other, for example. I think that's so smart to have like the kitchen table or the back patio or like have a designated space that suits that need, the energetic needs included, like all of the different needs. Um, and I'm sorry, I'm going to interject real quick because before we get too into the weeds, I think it's going to be helpful for anybody listening to. I have it written down here, but Susan Salvo in her textbook, Principles in Practice, she outlines 7 different boundary types. I find it helpful to categorize things a little bit, just, so we have some kind of left brain approach somewhat to talking about this stuff. So the ones that she outlines are physical, emotional, intellectual, like what you think and believe, sexual, time, financial, and energetic. So again, physical, emotional, intellectual, sexual, time, financial, and then energetic. And I like that energetic and emotional and intellectual have all, and physical, but that they've all been sort of delineated. Because we are going to have different needs to protect our A, right? For each of these. And I know there's more beyond just these 7, but as massage therapists, I think we tend to talk about energy often, right? It permeates everything, it's everywhere. And a lot of us sort of claim to have an assessment of what's happening on an energetic level that I would love to hear more massage therapists kind of detaching from their assumptions and not jumping from interpretation to assumption to belief. I think that's maybe an emotionally maturity thing too, or that's like a personal development thing. But I see the pattern where people pick up on energy. They make an assumption. They quickly jump from a thought to a no. I know this, like KNOW, not an NO, but I'm picking up on something energetic and then I interpret it and it's like truth for them. And I think that's a breach of a boundary too, when you assume that you know something or so even as you interpret, keep it curious, keep it loose, keep it detached from, I know this, it's not a fixed thing. We're always assessing, we're always gathering information, we're always curious and questioning as far as it pertains to how we're trying to relate to others or we're trying to help others, like our clients.
I think last time we talked about, we briefly mentioned IFS or internal family systems. And I think
Mhm.
that it, what I hear you talking about is a protector part, right? Like
Yeah.
in these people who are, you know, doing these things or whatever, like maybe they haven't examined their protector parts or whatever. And I'm wondering, like all those responses sound like protection. Like I'm gonna do this and I'm gonna know. Because that
Yeah.
feels like there's a safety with that, right? Like like I'm gonna know this. And it's like, I just wonder if there's like a softening that can happen with that, you know?
Yeah, it's really good internal work when you can learn to have, it's like the metacognition. It's like you have your cognition, you've got your thinking, but then your metacognition is how you think about your thoughts. It's the higher self talking, I think. It's that wisdom part. I'm wise enough to know I don't know. Even I know some stuff. but I'm not attached to what I know. But I do have some skills and I do have some knowledge and I am I am capable of helping if if right if this person is open to it, if their nervous system is open to it. Like it's never a fixed thing, you know. And so when we talk about boundaries, I think because of the nature of our work, it is so crucial that we maintain that boundary of suspension of fixation. We're never fixed. We're always curious, right? And so and that's again, like we're talking about energetic, but intellectual, emotional, like having that boundary where you are not projecting your experience or anything that you might think or believe onto your clientele, what they think, what they believe, what is real for them, right? That's kind of a sacred boundary, honestly. It's respect, I
Yeah.
would say.
Yeah, I think so too. And I think that you're kind of speaking to the delineation between like personal boundaries and professional boundaries because we
Yeah.
can have conversations with our personal connections. I'm thinking about this from a place of like, what are we putting on our clients? But like, we can have certain conversations with our friends or our personal connections that are way different than professional conversations, professional connections. And there does need to be like a line. There's a line there.
I think a lot of that has to do with the power dynamic.
Absolutely.
So professionally, since that's kind of the audience that's listening in and right, we're sort of talking to other people in our professional space for the most part, I would imagine. Um, I think the biggest thing that delineates how you show up in your personal spaces versus your professional spaces is that power dynamic. So when in doubt, default to whatever mode. I know what mode it is for me. It's almost like you're wearing a hat. If you could like put a hat on and switch out a hat, or you know, in some of the somatic experiences, like change the channel. It's like change your hat, change your hat. Literally when I put on my black shirt on and my black tights, it's like a uniform, even though I have the freedom to wear whatever I want.
Mhm.
When I'm in that mode, I'm I'm authentically me, but I'm not the same that I'm going to show up even here or in other spaces where the power dynamic is different. When my clients walk in the door, I am there to serve them. I am there to help them. And that has nothing to do with my ego. That has nothing to do with what I think, what I believe. I'm there to be in service to this client who is trusting me, right? And so out of that core value of respect, I'm going to show up authentically with all the boundaries there, you know. And again, because my practice is perinatal and very, very trauma informed, my default mode, at least, yeah, as a default mode, I was going to say there's some variability to that, but it's the default mode is to err on the side of less is more. And not just during the intake, I mean, during the session, afterwards, all phases of my client, you know, all phases of that communication. Um, what about you? How do you feel people can be aware as professionals of that power dynamic? Like, what are some things that maybe can help people shift into a healthier professional mode? Just paying attention to the power dynamic.
Well, I think the power dynamic is a very interesting topic all in and of itself. Like we could do a whole conversation on that. We have a lot, especially as women, massage therapists, caregivers, we have this very complicated relationship with power. And like personal power and like professional power and everything. I remember whenever I first little side story here. whenever I first became a massage therapist, my aunt asked me a question as if I were like an equal to her. And she was a nurse. So like, different approaches to things, but she actually like came to me and asked me my thoughts on something. And I remember that feeling, that somatic feeling of being like, whoa, wait a second, she's asking me. And I think that there's a like again, we can talk about power for a long time, but I think that we have a license and that gives us a certain amount of power, right? And if you read Unbound by Kasia Urbaniak, she talks a lot about power being like the attention being outward versus attention being inward. I don't know if you know about her, but she is
Oh.
um I don't want to get it wrong, but she lives a very interesting life, and she teaches very interesting things. But it's a lot about giving power to women, and it's a lot about like, are you putting your attention outside of yourself or is it inside? And a lot of times our default is to go inward, right? And when we are in a caregiving role, our attention almost always has to be outward, right? Because we're giving care to someone else. So I think that just that distinction itself is like, when is the appropriate time to be inward and when is the appropriate time to be outward, and what does that expression look like? I think that all that is like inner work to be done too, right? And that's, I mean, i think
Very interesting.
I think it's in the natural progression of life. This is my wise woman talking right now, right? It's like, in the natural progression of life, you go through things naturally where you'll be like, I didn't like the way I handled that. Was that an inward or an outward expression or like attention, you know? And I think it always comes back to boundaries. Like, we have to understand our boundaries enough to know when is the appropriate time to be like reflecting inward or attention inward or attention outward, right?
And just to make sure I'm tracking, I think I am, but the somatic terms or the nervous system terms that we could use also would be interoception and exteroception for what you're describing, right?
Yeah.
Or is
Yeah.
it more of a psychological analysis that you're talking about, or both?
No, I think you're tracking. I think it's more like, yeah, I do think that practice of interoception is so a big piece of this, right? Like being able to see when something is like affecting me versus when am I affecting something?
And just noticing when you feel something in your body and connecting it with what's happening externally,
Right.
and not just saying, oh, my stomach's been upset for 3 weeks. I don't know why. I don't know what I ate. Like, well, honey, you're going through something big in your like, connecting dots. It takes a moment to stop and pause. I think for so many, especially moms, it's really impossible during certain seasons. I don't want to say impossible, but you know what I'm saying? It's really, really hard to like pause because as our girl Kimberly Ann Johnson talks about, the eyes face, we take information in through the front of the head. The front and top of our physical form is
Okay.
where we're gathering in so much information. So we're naturally designed to gather externally and process from here, right? So it is a little bit of a learning curve to become habituated and to practice that. To really, it is a practice. It's like yoga or any other kind of practice. Um, yeah, to scan, to do those self scans, to notice, and then to do something about it, hopefully.
Right. Right. Absolutely.
Yeah.
So I feel like like, again, I think that power is really interesting. I think that it has like, it's almost like a dirty word. Like, I don't want too much power because like the people in
Mhm.
power are bad or whatever, like those are just some things that people think about. But I think that it also comes back into like your own personal power. Like, what do you have power in your life to do? What do you
Mhm.
Where are you power over versus power with versus power under? I mean, I think those are all like really interesting conversations to be having with yourself, but also the people around you, you know? Who has the
Mhm.
power in your relationship? Who has the power in your job? Like, if you're an employee, you don't have all the power. And that's okay. Like, that's not a bad thing. If you're a boss, you're the one in the power, and that's not a bad thing either, but what are we doing with it?
Yes. What can you control to protect your A? So, sidebar, I did an event at the garden here a couple weeks back, and it was kind of slow at one point, and so I ended up chatting with the assistant, the event assistant who was there. Her name is also Sarah. She's really cool. I've seen her at many events that I've done there, and so we've kind of developed some rapport. And she was sharing with me how she's kind of unhappy in her position right now. And she was sharing with me some details about her position. And so we really, really quickly went through the core values assessment, and I kind of gave her a version of that workshop I mentioned before to align your life. And basically, by the end of it, you create a little chart where there's like, it's like all these little boxes and the columns and the rows. The columns are each of your core values, and each of the rows are something you're trying to kind of work through, like a pain point. And so we were trying to brainstorm, and that's what you do in each of the little boxes, the vertices or whatever. You try to brainstorm ways to basically reach your total epic fulfillment of your core values. You can either by removing pain points, or you can go towards something. Anyway, I'm all of that to say, Sarah and I were talking about, okay, maybe this doesn't have to be a black and white thing. Maybe okay, you love working at this institution, but you're not happy in your role. What do you have influence over? Because that was, I think, her big pain point, is she felt powerless.
Mhm.
And so we were kind of trying to talk through ways to contradict that belief. And by the end of it, she was like, you know what? And she had some action items, which is what the end of the workshop leads you to, like several action items. Okay, what are you going to do? And she had decided she was going to go talk to so and so to think about maybe reworking some of the boundaries around her current role. And I felt, I didn't ask her this specifically, but I felt like she was more hopeful, maybe. Again, I don't know that, but I'm thinking maybe. I was curious. Okay, she seems a little bit more optimistic and hopeful and happy. Her energy definitely seemed more up. What by the
Well,
time we got to the end.
I think that these big life things are important, right? Like your job is really important.
Yeah.
And if you have unhappiness there, it's going to feel like a big pile on you. And like, I feel like with that exercise you did with her, you gave her like a little peephole so she could like look up and be like, okay,
Mm, a peephole. I like that.
out, or like, here's the way to something different. Maybe it's not
Oh,
like,
yeah, man. And we can all sympathize with her, right? I mean, God, we've been in the weeds and just felt like I can't see the forest. Like, which way do I go?
yeah,
And it's
absolutely.
like, well, you can go any which way you want, first of all. Like, don't feel trapped because you're not. But if there are certain boundaries and barriers, like financial or time or, yeah, other boundaries that exist, like it just takes, I think, and it takes time sometimes too to chew these things over, let it marinate, sleep on it. My God, sometimes our subconscious mind knows the answer that our waking
Yeah.
um, grinding away trying to come up with the perfect solution. Girl, sleep on it. Anyway,
Or
that
get into your body, because like that's what I always think too is
yeah,
not that our bodies are our subconscious, but like I do feel like our bodies hold ideas and wisdom that we aren't tapping into unless it's intentional.
100%. There's a compass in there, but again, for so many people that don't have the practice of tuning in,
Absolutely.
you gotta learn that frequency a little bit and then practice it. And it's like developing a muscle. And the beautiful thing about neuroplasticity and our beautiful organic selves and this divine design, this body, um, and this brain inside this body, is there's always plasticity and learnability, and we
Mhm.
can always decide who we want to become and then become that.
Mhm.
How fucking empowered a thought is that?
Mhm.
First, decide who you want to be, and then we've got the power. We always have the power. Like
Mhm.
if you can believe anything in the world, why not just believe that? That you can, I don't know. I know it seems a little pie in the sky, but
Well, and I also
it's
just want
true.
to, I feel like I want to say this too. When you were talking, I was thinking like you and I are both people who are super interested in like living our best lives and like doing that inner work to like break through some of the chains that we've maybe been inherited or given or whatever.
Yeah.
There are people who are not interested in that. Okay, like, and I can't understand. I'm not going to pretend to understand what that's like. I've just shared what I'm like, right? So, but I can also see how like, yeah, especially as like a busy mom, like when do I ever have time to sit down and journal? Or like when do I ever have time to slow down to see how this is working or whatever. But and I also want to say that it's really, really important to realize that when you are in a state of trauma or you're experiencing trauma or you're experiencing a long-term stressful event, it's really, really challenging to get to that place where you can have those inner dialogues, inner conversations, or like even, doing this inner work as they call it or whatever. And
Yeah.
I just want to say that like safety is always accessible, even whenever it's like down to a little thing like where in your body right now can you find even a little bit of safety? Maybe it's in your earlobe, maybe it's in the tip of your nose, maybe it's in the pinky toe. And it doesn't have to be this big thing like now I feel completely safe in all aspects of my life. Absolutely not. Like, but where can you find even just a little bit of safety? And
Hmm.
and really access that safety, tiny little safety as a resource, whether it's like your favorite pillow or a beautiful plant you love to look at. Like there are
Mm.
resources to be accessed in any situation, I hope. Um,
Yeah. Let
and
me interject real quick because there was a study that said even if you don't have safe people, right? We know enough about ventral vagal and the social safety system and all of that, um, to know that that is the state of, groundedness, regulation, all of that, and it's environmental and it's social, right? So it's the thing of, gazelles look at each other before they run away from the lion, right? We check in with each other. But if you're somebody that doesn't have any people, it just little quick study I was reading the other day. Um, Kids who snuggle a pet or a plushie, it can even be an inanimate object, their brain produces a lot of the happy hormones like oxytocin that produce feelings of safety and love. Um, so even if you don't have another human, you can use a safety surrogate in different forms to give yourself that feeling of safety. And I love that you gave the example of, other things. I just wanted to piggyback on that real quick and add there's science to back that up if it's something like a plushie or a pet. Like I know my old cat Loki was, oh my God. So
I know, I feel like we live in such an urgency culture. Like we have to download wisdom right now.
yeah.
Fix the problem right now. And I'm guilty of it in situations too, of course. But I also feel like when I remember, when I can slow down enough to find a moment of safety, even if it's in that inanimate object or whatever, like I'm gonna have more resource to my full brain capacity to logic or feel into whatever is happening. So I think that that's an important thing because I don't ever want to be like, okay, so how all day we're gonna spend in reflection or journaling or like whatever, whatever. It's like, no, we have to live a life. We have to go to the grocery store and pay the bills and all that stuff.
Yeah.
So I just like really want to say that, there is plenty of time, even when it feels like there's no time. I might be talking to myself right now.
No, no, there is a lot of wisdom. No, I appreciate you saying that, Sarah. There's wisdom in everything, and depending on where you are and when you are, right? The setting is where and when. So safety, it needs to be first. Self-safety needs to be first if we're talking about healing from trauma. Um, start with safety. I think you saw it was inside the perinatal professionals group. I posted a video the other day because I had an infant massage session. This is the first time it happened. I promise it won't take a lot of time, but just real quick, I want to share. Because this was a first and it was a new boundary that I found myself navigating in real time, right? I didn't have time to be like, I'm sorry, parents, can you just hold on and let me go workshop this by myself? No, like you have to figure it out. So what had happened was this couple came in and the mom uh is somebody I'd worked with many times, I think like 4 times, something like that throughout her pregnancy. And up until week 36, baby was breech and then baby flipped. So I was really happy about that. That was one of our primary goals for a lot of the work. But she came in with her husband and her 3-week-old postpartum. And baby had been crying for 3 straight hours prior to the appointment. They showed up a little bit late. Anyway, long story short, this was a session where, it was the first, I did not even put my hands on baby. I did not even hold baby, which that was so hard to not want to just comfort or hold or help in that way. But my intuition was that, and my empathy, again, switching intuition and empathy, but I was empathetically so attuned to what baby was going through. She'd had a lip and tongue tie a week prior. She was born 3 weeks prior to that. Not to get into detail, but it was not an easy birth. It was a vaginal delivery, but it was a long labor. And so this tiny human was crying because that's all she's got, right? She's communicating distress and pain and all of these things. And so I was trying to kind of coach mom and dad without, again, attuning to their needs and boundaries. I didn't want to overwhelm them. They're already so beyond overwhelmed, exhausted, frustrated, all of the things you could possibly imagine. And on top of baby's been crying for 3 hours. So anyway, I did not charge them. That was my financial boundary, that I did a quick self-scan and that felt right. I felt lighter when I entertained the thought in that little microsecond of like, nope, I'm not going to charge them. And I asserted that at the top of the session when they first came in. I was like, look, if she continues to be fussy, this is what we're going to do. So I let them know what to expect at the top of it. And then, but I was loose and I was like, okay, well, let's try a couple things. We'll see how she does. And if things change, then, but it ended up not changing. And so they ended up leaving even more frustrated, I think, and exhausted. And, I checked in with mama. I was really, really empathizing for her. The reason I came on and did the video about it was because, in addition to many other firsts, it's very, very rare for me to take my work home with me energetically. And I think because I was so attuned to this mom and I was so empathetically with her, I just saw her and felt her. And I know a lot of other therapists that go on, Badass Body Workers or other awesome groups share these kinds of experiences. And here I was having one of those experiences, which I hadn't since I can remember, honestly. I'm really well boundaried in that way. But I took that work home with me because I just wish there was more that I could have done for that mama because of that deep empathy and just feeling for her. So on that note, I have a typical practice that I do whenever clients do leave. I'll wash my hands and I'll thank them. As I'm washing my hands, I'm like thinking about what I received. Because I think a lot of times therapists, we focus on, I wish I could have given more, Well, what did we receive in that? thank you for your time. Thank you for coming in. Thank you. Anything that comes to mind. That's my practice as I wash my hands. Thank you for da 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 da. And that helped me a little bit, sort of energetically and in other ways, kind of cleanse the experience. But in maintaining our boundaries, we've got to think about, well, and let me backtrack. Sometimes we don't realize a boundary's been crossed until it gets to that place where it's a pain point or a friction point. And that's what I experienced. And that's how you kind of know is you find those boundaries by crossing them.
Absolutely.
But then, okay, what do I do about it? And so you just kind of reinforce. And of course, I shared my experience in that Facebook group because I felt good about, I slept on it, and then the next morning is when I posted. I felt really solid. I felt very good, like I had done the right thing, and it was a hard situation, and I handled it well. And so I wanted to like give myself credit where it was due, but also and empathize with myself, right? The empathy I gave to mama, I gotta get some of that too. It's on tap. Fill me up. So give myself some of that compassion. Um, but it's difficult, especially with babies who are nonverbal. And I, again, I try to kind of coach mom and dad, like her nervous system, everything is about co-regulation right now. Yada, yada, yada. I kind of went into my little mini, teaching moment there with mom and dad, 5 minutes or less, but just explained how massage was not going to calm baby. Massage to this tiny human was going to be sensory stimuli that is not what this tiny human needs right now. She needs mom and dad to co-regulate, and she needs to learn safety as that baseline.
Mhm.
Okay, that was basically my spiel. Felt better about it the next day, posted that experience to share with others, and then cleansed, walked away. So even if we fumble through, it's a beautiful process of analyzing and reflecting, and then, okay, what am I going to do next time? Right? Keep on going.
Right. Right. I mean, I think we mentioned this last in our last session too, but like if the shelf life of a massage therapist is 6 years, that's just not enough time to have those kind of reparative experiences too, right? Where it's you have the kind of boundary, not violation, but like crossing over it a little bit to then come back and recalibrate. It's like you need to have a lot of years and a lot of experiences, a lot of hands-on bodies or whatever, or feet on bodies in my case, but that will give you the experience to move through it.
And I think this is burnout. When we see burnout, that, yep, your face doesn't. It's like that's the line being crossed habitually.
Absolutely.
So think about how you might want to reinforce your fences a little bit. And that's going to lead us into our conversation about communication. That's, yeah, that's the how.
Yeah. Yeah, I mean, and I also think it's embodiment, right? It's about understanding the embodied boundaries through moving through them, then having that like recalibration, like I was saying. It's almost like, okay, now I know that this is not an okay situation, or this is not what I'm good with, or whatever. And then being able to have that embodied experience of this is what an embodied boundary is like. And then, yeah, the next piece
Integrate. Yep.
communicate about it. And I think that I mean, I don't want to dismiss the physicality of our work either, because there is something to be said for the like the giving of our bodies that also contributes to burnout and contributes to, oh, this is a way more physical job. And I have some thoughts about that. Obviously, I have some really big thoughts about that. We can save that for another time, but um
Well, physical boundaries is one of those areas that
oh,
go
and
out time.
absolutely, but I also think it's about money. It's about what are you charging?
Survival. Yeah.
And I think we all should be probably charging more. I don't know.
Yes, yes, yes. So while these boundaries, Salvo did such a lovely job of delineating and categorizing them, they all flow together. So it's helpful to see them all kind of differently. But when we think about the pain points in our life, we could, okay, I'm burned out. I need money. I did so that's another reason why I really like that workshop.
Mhm.
And the workshop often led into one-on-one coaching, as I'm sure you can imagine how those conversations would I need to have more one-on-one. Because it's a lot to dive into. There are many different boundaries existing simultaneously all the time, how we manage them externally versus internally. What can I control or have influence over? That's the negotiation. And that's where a lot of the brainstorming, and that's where a lot of your personal power, I think, can come in, because you can realize all the ways that you can stand up for yourself, basically.
Right, right. And you're worth standing up for, like, it's the
Yeah.
self-compassion part. So I'm curious if you feel complete in our time today with boundaries. I feel like we could do a whole another thing about boundaries, but
Yeah, I feel like I've said everything I wanted to say. And
awesome.
I could talk, just point and click. I'll talk until you tell me to stop.
Oh, I could too.
We
All
can
right.
both.
Well, I love this conversation. Again, we'll follow it up with more communication conversation next week. And yeah, follow us, do the thing. I hate like to request it, but it's like at this point, can we all just agree that like if you go on a social media page, if you like even just anything about it, like, click, follow, share, do the thing, because all of us are all trying to do.
Yeah, do the thing. Do the things.
All right. All right, Rachel, I love our conversations. Thank you so much, and we'll be back um next time.
All right. Thanks again. Talk to you soon.